Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Social Flight Live. I'm Jeff Simon. We have such a special show for you this evening. Brian Shul is here. You know him as Sled Driver. He has such an amazing story, and I cannot wait to bring him on the line. And so I'm going to have a quick few notes, as I always do, and try to keep it as brief as possible so we can get Brian here, because his story is just absolutely fascinating. So tonight's broadcast, as always, will be recorded and available on our YouTube channel. Just do a search on YouTube and SocialFlight, one word, SocialFlight, and you'll find our channel. Please subscribe, hit the bell, and you'll be able to see future shows that we do. And of course, we have that. We have videos of our trips, and we have lots of things of building this T-51 Mustang behind me. And there's some new videos coming up shortly because the boys have been hard at work on that now that school's over. So very, very cool things going on in that regard. And with that, I would also like to mention something about events and Social Flight. You know, again, Social Flight itself, socialflight.com and the free Social Flight mobile apps were dedicated just to support General Aviation. It's here for you. And we've seen a comeback in events, live events, as the pandemic has started to cut back and life has started to return to normal, but still not as many as we would like to see. The numbers of actual pancake breakfast, Young Eagles events, and fly-ins, and all these meetings that are happening in person, we need more of them. And so with that, I just want to send the message out there. If you want to have your chapter or anywhere else do an event, be sure to go to socialflight.com and list it there. All you need to do is hit a plus sign, and you can list any event completely free, and that will make it easy for so many people to come and attend. And that's what we're here for, to get people out of the house, out there, and actually flying and supporting our industry. And of course, then we'll also be at AirVenture and some of the bigger events that are happening. So with that, now I would like to also introduce, of course, tonight's guest, which is Brian Shul. Brian Shul is a combat veteran. He was shot down and survived life-threatening burns. He fought his way back way beyond just simple recovery and got himself all the way through a series of aircraft into the famous SR-71 Blackbird spy plane. He's a soldier, a pilot, an author of several books that are absolutely fantastic, and an inspiration to all of those around him. And with that, I'd like to bring Brian on the line here, and hopefully everything's coming on for everybody there. Excellent. How are you doing, Brian? Welcome to the show.
Well, great. Thank you very much for having me.
Listen, there's so much to talk about, and I just want to start with your love of flying and how it all got started before when you first started getting into flying and before you even got into the military equipment. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's a very memorable moment in my young life. As a little 8-year-old, I was pretty sure I was going to play third base for the Yankees when Cletus Boyer was done, and they would call me, of course. They didn't. But I blame it all on the Thunderbirds. My dad took me to an air show in Virginia way back in the 50s, and I saw those planes flying. It was one of those big Memorial Day shows where the Blue Angels and the Thunderbirds were there. But it was those F-100s gleaming in the sun. And in those days, you could run up to the jets when they parked at the end of the show. They taxied the jets right up to the crowd line, and then people could move forward for autographs. And I was out there trying to touch the jet, and they were all upset, like, "Hey, that's hot back there. Don't be." I had built the model airplanes, and when I saw and heard jets fly like that, I had never seen that. It changed my life. Reached right in and gripped your soul, and I said, I just must do this. Maybe I'll just fly for a couple of years, and then I'll go play for the Yankees. But it became a bit of an obsession and a goal, and it got me thinking about it all the way through high school. And when I was in college, I had one goal, one main aim was to get in the Air Force and fly airplanes. And so it was just I built all the model airplanes like most kids did, and but I really imagined that little plastic man in the canopy there that was me, and I had to paint the little face. If you didn't paint the face, it just didn't count. It wasn't alive. So
That's awesome.
yeah, it was a childhood thing that everyone was pretty sure I would outgrow, and I think hoped I would. But I didn't. And to their credit, my parents, who were very great people, supported your decision that if that's what you really want to do, okay. My dad was in the military for 32 years in the Marine Corps, so he said, no, that's if you want to go in the Air Force, that's where the flying is the primary mission.
So it was the Air Force your first actual piloting. That's how
I
you
had
actually.
never flown 1 minute, 1 second, wasn't in ROTC. I didn't even know an aileron from a rudder. Got to pilot training and was way behind. I thought, well, they're going to teach me all this stuff now. Well, yeah, it was read the book tonight, tomorrow we're flying.
That's
So
awesome.
it was not easy initially.
Do you remember some of the first flights that you ever did in your
Oh,
training?
God, they were horrible. In those days, you know, we had T-41s, little Cessna 172s out on the ramp at Lubbock, Texas. No wind there, I'm sure, calm days. And my first flight was a wind recall. Got to the end of the runway, had to taxi back because of the winds, and the man was yelling at me the entire time because I was not putting the aileron into the wind, a concept I had not only never heard of but did not understand why we would do that. So to say I was behind the power curve is an understatement. That man was definitely never going to fly the world's fastest jet. That man was doomed to be in a missile silo real soon if he didn't figure it out. So the first 6 weeks were extremely stressful and very challenging because what they wanted to do was wash the people out in T-41s, not to waste jet fuel on them. And I got down to where he said, if you don't solo today, that's it. You know, we're just not going to waste any more time on you. We have a lot of people here. So I did. I soloed, and he signed me off, and he said, well, you'll probably kill yourself in jets, but you got a good attitude, kid. We're going to let you go. I said, geez, that's what I knew. Attitude's everything, you know. So I was lucky in that I really applied myself. I'll tell you that it was a really an interesting year, and then I got better as we went, and I got in T-37s, and then by T-38s I was loving the formation and flying because it felt like what I had imagined it felt when I was building the model airplanes. The Cessna with that left hand on the yoke and the throttle, it was like, what is this? When I got in a T-38, I got a helmet and a mask, and I had throttles and afterburners, and I had a stick. And for some reason, I only knew at that moment, and it took me to the end of pilot training, that yes, I was in the exact right place in the universe where I was supposed to be. But I had a lot of doubts about that leading up to that. It was, if nothing else, I was persevering. But
Wow.
I wanted it bad enough, and I always tell young people, if you want it bad enough, you'll do it. You have to love it, want it, and really want it. And it was humbling, and but again, because I had no ROTC, I didn't have any flying whatsoever, and I thought, well, they're just going to hand teach you every little thing, you know. And but by the end of the pilot training, I felt very comfortable in a T-38. I was flying. He said you're my best formation student. He said, how'd you learn to fly such good formation? I said, well, you just taught me. I don't know. I just liked it. I took to it in a way that, like I said, made me realize this is what you should be doing, even with all the doubt you had those previous few months.
Wow. So that really, it's almost like the very beginning of your learning was already following the same kind of curve of challenge and pushing through before
Well,
you
you know,
actually.
I have so many people come up to me today, and young students or people that want to go into it, and they say, well, you must have just been a gifted pilot to fly the SR-71 on. I said, let me tell you about the kid who almost washed out of pilot training, and they need to hear that story. That you didn't walk in and you aced every test and you flew great from the beginning. And it's a greater lesson to hear that story than to hear, well, some people are gifted and you're not.
Right.
You want it bad enough, you can do it. And I'm living proof that it can be done.
So what was your first operational aircraft that you were when you were deployed? Was that the AT-28 Nomad?
Right. When I graduated from pilot training, they had a very, very poor selection of. They had about every KC-135 and B-52 and C-130 in the whole Air Force. We had one F-4. That was it. And I looked up and down that list, and there was a T-28 there, and I was one of the few guys that knew exactly what that was. I'd really been into airplanes and knew what they were doing and everything. And everybody else said, "Why would you want to go to props? That's bad. It's a kiss of death. You'll never amount to anything in props." And I said, "Well, I'm going to be flying a fighter type airplane. Won't be around forever, so I'm going to have to go to something else. And it's different, and I like that, and it's challenging, and I'll probably learn a whole lot in the next couple of years." And it wasn't a B-52. And that was my first assignment at Keesler Air Force Base in Mississippi. And we were the last of the T-28 guys and the last prop trainers. We were training foreign air forces, Laotians and Thais and Vietnamese, and that was challenging in itself. But you got to learn a lot as a young lieutenant. And then when they needed foreign air advisors over there in theater, we're the only guys that were flying that airplane. So most of the squadron all went over there to Thailand en masse. And that airplane kind of saved my life too. It was so rugged it could crash right into the jungle and blow up, and still kind of didn't come apart too much to kill me. So I have a fond spot in my heart for that little T-28. It was a great way to learn flying. We were doing ADF approaches. It's all manual, of course. I mean, people today, they want to buy T-28s to fly them, and it's a nostalgic thing. But we did it. We did it for a couple, 2-3 years as our job, and we got to wring out every capability of the airplane. I flew the A, B, C, and D model of the T-28.
Wow.
So it was just a great way for a young pilot to learn how to pilotage skills, map reading, and navigating manually and looking out the window. And when I look at the glass tube cockpits today, I just laugh and go, "Is anyone learning any pilotage or real airmanship here?"
So that was you went not just training people, but you were operational in the T-28, and that's
Yeah.
actually...
Well, that word air advisor is kind of a catch-all phrase that you don't really, you're technically your cover story is you're training the young foreign nationals, and we were doing a lot of that. We were certainly doing a lot of that, and sometimes we weren't. But it was near the very end of the war anyway. And what was happening at that point is most of the big part of the war in North Vietnam was over, but the Khmer Rouge and the whole thing in Cambodia was moving up from the south, and that's where Laos and Thailand, southern Thailand, was very concerned. And that's probably what shot me down, just small arms fire. To this day, they're not even sure. They're pretty sure. I said, "Does it make any difference? All I know is I lost power and I couldn't fly the airplane anymore." It was going down. So
was it the controls, or was it the engine itself? You said that went out.
The engine itself, yeah. It was just and it was still working just enough to keep the propeller turning, which was a good thing, I thought, to plow through the jungle trees, which it did amazingly.
Wow.
A lot of noise, a lot of terror, trauma. But that whole thing about you see your life pass before your eyes, that's true. And things slow down into slow motion. And there wasn't a lot of fear at that point. It was sort of like, okay, well, I'm just going to die here in the next 5 seconds. So you just are very calm, and it's not a heroic thing or a panic thing. You've done everything you can do, and here come the trees, and never done this before. Then a gut-wrenching sound of wings being ripped off, and but I was very fortunate. I had really good Air Force training, and I used to give an Air Force safety lecture for many years based on my crash about wearing your sleeves all the way down with the Velcro fastened, having your gloves on, and having 2 visors down. Had I only had 1 visor down in those old helmets, I would have lost my vision, because the outer visor had already melted away, and the second one was already beating up. I did the entire egress blindfolded because I couldn't see anything because of that. and that's where my training was pretty good. The one thing they didn't tell you in training is when they say the Concorde has a 43-pound quick disconnect force, but they don't tell you what it is when that entire plastic connector has melted. There you have about 1,000,000-pound not going to break it force. And I always tell people, I reached back, if something was holding me in when I was ready to get out, and it was that cord, and I reached back in, I pulled it, and I broke that cord in half, and it cost me the use of this finger, except for the little hinge joint they put in it, which is a key part of the story later of how I passed the physical. But it was so hot that you didn't care at that moment, and I defy you to rip a Concorde in half today. As I was tell people, be amazed what you can do when you have to.
Wow.
And I was, laid there in the jungle and for a little while, and they were pretty aware of where I was in the fireball, and I got rescued pretty quickly. But the extent of the injury was such that the medical center there in Thailand couldn't quite handle it, so they patched me up enough to put me on a C9 and came up from the Philippines that night and landed there at the base, and it took me to Kadena, where they had a burn center, not center, but a burn ward in the hospital there. And they flew a 9-man burn team out of Fort Sam Houston all the way to Kadena just for me. And
Wow.
me and those folks got real well acquainted in the next 2 months. And I think I called them every name I could think of. But they saved my life, and they were great folks. And 2 months later, I was well enough to get medevac back to the States on a C-141, and then spent almost a year there at Fort Sam Houston at the Brooke Army Medical Center. And it was just a long road to recovery. And what I found in it was that, there were 3 phases you had to go through. The first phase was you had to accept this has happened. Because when you wake up and you can't use your body, and you see it and you look at it and you go like, this is a nightmare. I don't even know how to fight this. Secondly, then you have to fight the pain and the recovery, the physical part of it. And then the third part, psychologically, you have to accept that this I'm going to have to just make certain adjustments to this, and that third part lasts for the rest of your life. But most people don't get through that first acceptance of it. It's like I can't deal with this, and they die. And I went from 180 pounds of raw muscle and steel, as you see today, to 119 pounds. And they said, if you don't eat, you're gonna just. And I, at that point, and this is where I make a big point to tell people in my talks, so they are sure not to think of me as some hero. I wanted to give up, and I'm an inspirational speaker today. I'm very proud of that, and I'm proud of the fact I've had on so many people in a positive way. And yet, I would be dishonest not to admit that I gave up. I wanted to quit, and I just said, please God, let me die. And I find that hard to even believe today, but I did. And when you finally reach rock bottom and you finally come to that realization, you realize then you just have 2 choices. You're either just going to quit, your life's over, or you're just going to make that attempt to come back. And it's a choice. It's just a choice. That's nothing heroic or nothing, no secret message of life, or not some superpower. It's a choice. Now, the key part of that theory is that it's no guarantee when you make that choice that it's all going to work. You're going to live, survive, you're going to go fly jets someday. No guarantee, but that's not the point. The point is, you're not going anywhere if you just quit. So you at least have a chance. You at least have an opportunity. And I made that choice. And of course, that was the harder choice. It was easier just dying. The harder choice was going through all that therapy and all, but it was worth it to have that life. And it was a lot of therapy. They wanted to cut off 2 of my fingers. Luckily, one doctor said, well, no, let's try and save those, and let's just make them work extra hard with the clay ball. My elbows had to be cut out because my arms were stiff. I couldn't bend my arms or anything. It's just 15 surgeries. And they said, okay, well, here's the good news. You're going to live, and you're young, and you're healthy enough that you can at least have a life. And the bad news is you're never flying again at all. So let's get that straight. And I thought, well, you've just taken away every bit of motivation to help me through all those therapy sessions, because I knew I'd probably never fly again, but don't tell me that. Don't
Mm,
say that. And
right.
by them saying that, it almost helped me, because I thought, well, that's just such a bad attitude. Why would you say that to the patient? At least let's pretend. You're asking me to bend these fingers where it's gut wrenching every day. I'm screaming, and you give me no reason to now. So I pretended I was going to fly again. And every time the Air Force, as you know, San Antonio has a military personnel center right there, and we're right across town at Fort Sam Houston. They're going, we keep sending them his discharge papers, and he won't sign them. And I'd throw them in the trash, and I'd go, where's all this giving up stuff? It's like, yeah, I know I'll never fly again, but let me just have this moment of disassociation where I think I might, and I can get through the damn therapy, and then I can walk out the door someday, because I staying in there was just horrible.
Mm.
And that led to one of the most meaningful moments of my entire career. Uh, Military Personnel Center over there said, we don't know what to do with this guy. Is he going to be back in the Air Force? Is he going to fly again? Is he still technically on duty, active duty? He won't sign the discharge. And one day I woke up from my bed, and there's my surgeon, Dr. Peterson, a great guy, colonel in the Army. He was just one of the best surgeons ever, headed up the University of North Carolina Burn Center years later. And there's this Air Force colonel in a blue suit there. They're both staring at me, and I say, well, what's you can't do any more to me now. Well, what am I in trouble? And the colonel said, I just wanted to meet you. I'm from Military Personnel Center over there across the town. I just wanted to meet you. And I go, what do you mean? He says, well, you've caused quite a stir in the Air Force here. Lieutenant Shul laying in the third floor of the Fort Sam Houston burn ward. It's like, what do you mean? He said, well, they're very upset with you, and it's a big deal. They don't know what to do with you, and you're not signing the papers. So they asked me to come over here and see if you think you ever will fly again or anything. And I thought, well, why, how can you make that determination? He said, well, I'm the chief flight surgeon of the entire Air Force. And I thought, wow, could that have been any better person to come at my bedside? And he was a really nice man, and it warms my heart every time I tell a story. And he goes, I go, well, why would you? He said, I'll tell you what I'll do. Your surgeon here said he's going to operate on you for another few months, and when you think you can pass a flight physical, you come see me, and I'll give it to you personally, and I'll be hard on you. And if you can't pass it, you aren't going to fly anymore. But if you can, my signature will be on the top of those medical records, no one else's. And I said, now that's an opportunity. Now that's all you can ask for. And I said, why would you do that for me? I'm a nobody. He said, I like your attitude. He said, we need more people like you in the Air Force. And it's just one of the proudest. That's better than getting a silver star, to hear him say that. And I said, thank you for realizing what's been going on here. And I said, giving me that chance. And I pretty much was sure I wouldn't pass that physical. But he gave me that chance. And one day I was in a hospital gown and went over to Randolph Air Force Base, and they got me a room at the Q. It was a two-day physical, everything. I had no internal injuries. I had no, eyes were fine. My heart was fine. Lungs, everything that normally kills you was fine. But we came down to this little finger thing where they wanted to amputate those fingers. And luckily, one doctor built a hinge joint in that finger. And what that meant was you could grasp. And that's what the book said. If the ability to grasp, you can't flunk them. Doesn't matter how deformed his finger is. And they put a little titanium pin in there. There's a little irony in that finger. And he said, damn, he says, I can't flunk you. You, every single thing, he says, you are 1A, no waivers. And I said, nobody's going to believe that. Taking a look at me. He says, yeah, you look like shit. He said, but you are one tough guy. You are 1A with no waivers. He says, your body just did it. And he said, you're a little underweight now. You're 150. You should be about 175, And they put me in a T-38 to make sure I didn't have any adverse, my scar tissue wasn't affecting anything, which he didn't think it would. and I was pretty excited about that. And next thing you know, the Air Force said, "All right, you got 2 days, you got 48 hours, get your gear and report to Holloman for jet recall. You're going to A7s," because that's what
Oh
I
my
wanted.
God.
And because they wanted me to go to F4s, because they said, "Well, have another guy with them," because we're not sure Shul can even do this. And on the other, there was another contingency that said, "Let's put him in a KC-135 at a crew because we don't know if he's going to be weak enough or too weak to fly." And I said, no, I want A7s. And some very good people up at headquarters in assignments went to bat, and they knew, my story, I guess, was getting out. And I guess I just impressed enough people with my attitude as a young lieutenant, and they said, "No, give the guy a chance. If he can do it, he can do it." Now, I'll admit my first few flights in the AT-38 at Holloman weren't sterling. I was a little rusty, and I took a lot of heat from my instructor, who kept saying, "You're letting these lieutenants fly rings around, these new guys right out of pilot training, and come on, you're an experienced guy." And he was really harping on me. And then about a week or two later, my medical records arrived. They're 3 feet high, and he was looking through. He said, "Geez, why didn't you tell me?" I said, "No, I don't want any favoritism whatsoever. I can either do it or I can't. If I'm dangerous and I can't fly the formation, or I can't squeeze the stick hard enough, or my fingers don't work, I don't want to do it." And long story short, I went on to A7s and went to Myrtle Beach, flew the A7, just the greatest little airplane. And we became designated the very first squadron to get the A10, the Green Demons 356
Wow.
fighter
So I'm
squadron.
showing everyone right now, of course, the A6 Intruder. Sorry, the A6, the A7 Corsair 2.
A6 Intruder.
A6. Sorry, I'm going backwards in my numbers. A7 Corsair 2 that you were flying at that point.
Yes.
Then moving from that, you had the opportunity to go into the
Well,
A10.
One day the A10 showed up at Myrtle Beach, and of course we didn't want to leave the A7. It was such a cool Cadillac of fighter jet, and we didn't understand this A10. It was gawky looking, it was big, it was slow. It was like, well, we weren't even sure, but we wanted to do it. So they had 2 jets on the ramp, and there was a change of command, and our commander was an old F-100 guy, great guy, and he turned around, said, "At ease," he said, "Guys, it's got a big gun and the right number of seats. Let's do this." And never had more fun in my Air Force career. For the next 4 to 5 years, I flew the A-10. I was an air show demo guy. I was on the very first air show team, writing your name in the desert with that gun. Oh, I forgot to dot the I. Putting it on display all over, going to all the Army exercises because it was a new thing, so it had to be shown. And another part to my story, it was sort of a psychological thing, and people look at me as a certain kind of person today now, but I just want them to know that it was a very difficult and human road that was required to do all this, and many people helping you along the way, from all those surgeons and therapists and doctors and people at assignments. I mean, it wasn't done by one man. When I got to Myrtle Beach, there was I'll never forget this, another turning point in life. I was still pretty self-conscious about how I looked and how I felt, and I was still adjusting. It took about 2.5 years to adjust to all that. Look in the mirror and see a different person than you had seen for 25 years. And one day there was a big open house in Omaha, Nebraska, the SAC off at Air Force Base there, and they wanted an A7 from Myrtle Beach for the Memorial Day weekend, 3 days. Well, nobody wanted to do. They wanted to be with their family. Man, I volunteered so fast for that. And I knew that I needed to stand out in front of the crowd and kind of absorb people looking at me and everything, because I was already starting to get some of that, but I was pretty protected there in Little Myrtle Beach, and everything. So I volunteered, and the commander said, "Great, that's good. Take the jet there, have a great time with the show, and put it on display." And I thought, this is not going to be easy for me to do, but I needed to do it. And that morning at 6 a.m., the day I was supposed to take off and go, the wing commander wants to see me in his office. And I go in there, it's just him and me at the big long table. And he said, we're not going to let you do the show. We're gonna let Doug, your buddy, go. So give him all the flight planning and everything." And I says, we just don't want the civilian community getting the wrong idea that flying jets is dangerous. You know, if they see you, it's just gonna give the wrong message.
Oh God.
And I thought I was hearing wrong, you know, and I thought I was in some twilight zone for a moment. And I'm looking at him going like, what? At least you could have made up a different reason why you didn't want me. You didn't have enough hours in the jet or something, you know. And I just sat there. I didn't know whether to cry or scream or throw up. I honestly was just frozen with shock. And he said, "So nothing against you, Brian, but we don't want to portray that kind of image and you know, to the public, you know. So you know, all right. Now I had to make that walk from the commander's office back to the squadron, which was only about 100 yards across the grass there. It's a very small base, Myrtle Beach was. And instead, I took a long walk back. I says, I want to have to stop and think about this now, because this is a trauma. I felt like, okay, you're either going to rip off your wings right now and just quit, or you're going to have to, how are you going to deal with this? So I took a long walk around the fuel dump and where they load all the bombs and rockets for the planes. And I didn't realize, you know, I was in the woods there, and then here comes a truck with three. The maintenance guy says, "Sir, are you okay? Do you need a ride? What are you doing out here?" And I had realized I'd taken kind of a long walk. I said, "No, I'm fine." And I had finally, I had thought about it really hard, and I thought this is exactly the kind of hurdle you need to jump over, because if you don't, everything you just went through, all the hell, was worthless. It didn't mean anything. This is one man, one guy. And it took me 45 minutes on that walk to come to that conclusion. Came back in the squadron. Everyone had already heard. They're all pissed. The commander said, "I will go with you right now and lay my career on the line for you. We'll go in and tell the commander." I said, no, that'd be the worst thing to do right now. Let's just go along with it. Just do it. So the point of that story is that when we transitioned to the A-10, that commander, by the way, was fired, and a new commander came in. And he said, we're going to need somebody to take this A-10 all over the country to every Army base, and we need somebody for PR for this jet. And he looked right at me. He said, "Brian, do you know anybody who would like to do that?" I said, "God, I would love to." And he said, I'll drop the entire air show. I've made up the whole air show thing. But that commander was really a great guy. He was really smart. And he knew I was a good guy and everything. But he knew that would be the greatest growth. And it was. I did more air shows in the A-10 and demos and things. And it was just great. I had over 2,000 hours in the A-10. And it wasn't all about you're the greatest pilot we ever saw and you're the greatest guy and you're gifted. It was nothing like that. It was just, you know, having a good attitude in life. It was obvious I loved what I was doing, devoted to it. And so I became Mr. A-10. And then I was the first A-10 guy ever to go to the SR-71. But those stories are important to me. They'll be in my memoir someday, I'm sure, because people get a certain image of what your life must have been like, and for the gifted, you know, people and great heroic pilots, and it's nothing like that. It's just real regular people with feelings and desires and attitude, and keeping things in perspective and making choices.
Wow.
And so people don't always never hear those stories about people's careers and how they hang on a thread where one little finger could have kept you from ever flying again.
Yeah.
One commander could have made me quit just out of the heat of the moment. So in every great story of a passion in life or a career, it's never a straight line, but there's a common thread of perseverance and keeping your eye on the big picture.
Wow. That is just amazing. And
Yeah.
as you said, it's so personal and
Yeah.
and how after everything you'd been through, a single commander can.
But don't think I didn't enjoy every air show where all those kids were lined up at that A-10 at the Cleveland National Air Show. I had the biggest line of people there. I don't think I didn't enjoy every minute of it, and it all came full circle.
Wow.
Yeah.
Isn't that fantastic?
It was. I had a great career because I made it fun. I mean, it was just, um,
Such a
it's hard to
theme.
describe.
So tell me, after all this, how did that transition happen then from I mean, the A-10 is about as stick and rudder aircraft as you can
Yeah,
have. I love it. I
it's
had
a T, it's a,
models of it.
it's a
That was my
T-28.
favorite plane out there. You know, yank and bank and just as
Yeah.
hard as it could be. How do you go from that to basically a spaceship?
Well, you get to a point in your career. I went to Holloman to the fighter lead-in. I was the head of air to ground academics there, and I had avoided and evaded the staff job uh, one too many times. And the colonel at Langley said, "You're not going to any more flying here. You're coming there doing a staff job." And I had to figure out where in the Air Force could a senior officer, a major, go and stay in the cockpit. Well, one was give me the leader of the Thunderbirds. I wasn't going to do that. But the other I found was you could apply to fly the Blackbird, and they in fact were not just taking SAC guys; they wanted TAC guys, tactical air command guys, and they were looking for candidates. So I applied, and they said, "God, we'd love to have you, but your command will never let you go. We would love to have guys with your amount of tactical experience." And I called back to Langley, and the guy said, if you ask the question one more time, I will have you court-martialed. He was so pissed at me for not having a staff job, which told me he really hated his staff job. It wasn't a great advertisement. So I had a very good general of our base who used to play racquetball. I was the base racquetball champ. I played for racquetball many years, and I was always the base champ. He his name was General Horner. You might have heard of Chuck Horner, and he was a great guy. And I went to his offices. I said, I need a letter from my commander if I'm really going to make a push to do this. And we had a long talk about a lot of things I won't bore you with, but he's just a great man, a great gentleman. And he said, if you really want to do this, I'll make a couple of phone calls. And that's how I got a interview. And they were hungry to get tactical guys with first pilot experience. They were getting a lot of B-52 and tanker guys and stuff, and they really preferred. It was more of a fighter cockpit type setup. Anyway, so I cheated death. No staff job. I pissed off a lot of people by going 20 years in the Air Force, flying for the entire 20 years. And yes, I retired as a major. I did not want to be a colonel. I didn't care about that. I did care about flying. And I had 20 years flying, and I had 5,000 hours of fighter time when I retired. And that's what I wanted to do. I was still that 12-year-old kid building model airplanes when I joined the Air Force. I didn't join the Air Force to go sit behind a desk somewhere at Langley and wear your blue suit every day and just run around doing all these projects that
And so you got the job, and this is the picture.
Yeah. It was a pretty intense training, a year. It's longer than pilot training to get checked out in the jet.
A year to get checked out
1
in the
year.
SR-71 for an experienced fighter pilot.
Oh yes, it's a 1 year program, and you're in the simulator for the first 4 to 6 months before you're being allowed to touch the airplane. So you hit some serious sim time. But I would just remember one funny story when I was interviewing. It's a week-long interview. 2 days are at Travis for the astronaut physical, which I passed with flying colors. The doctor there said, "God, you're all burned up, and you got one of the highest scores we've ever seen." I said, "Man, it's all about motivation and working out, and internal, my internal body was not damaged." But when then you fly the T-38 with the commander, you mix with the guys, and then you get to go out and watch a launch. They take you in the hangar, watch a startup, and you see this amazing airplane starting up and just drooling of fuel and seeping out liquid oxygen, and you got Buick V8s revving up in the background to turn over the turbine there, and you go like, holy moly, you see this long black-nosed taxi out, and they take you to taxiway Charlie to watch the takeoff. And you're just so excited, and you're thinking, man, I don't even know if I could fly this airplane. It's pretty big and pretty powerful. And so the guy giving you the little tour, he was one of the backseaters, real nice guy, and he goes, "Just stand right here. It's going to be a sound you won't forget." And I thought, well, I've heard F4s take off real close, here comes this airplane and rattling down the runway, and it's a beast. And when it gets right there to taxiway Charlie and starts that rotation, the sound pierces. It's not a sound you hear, it's a sound that pierces your skull and eardrums and goes right through your body, the decibels. I don't know any other way to describe it. And it only hurts for about 1/10 of a second. There's pain, but then it's like the pleasure of the after effect of that sound. And it roars by, and then you watch this big airplane do about a 40-degree nose up climb, and it's gone. And you're just in awe. And he said, so what'd you think? Now, of course, you want to be professional, not like you want this job. You want to appear mature. And I said, well, would it be inappropriate to admit that I just peed in my pants? He laughed. He said, you're okay, Shul. He said, I felt the same way when I saw it the first time, you know. And I didn't really pee in my pants, but I could have. I'll tell you, it was a sound you didn't hear. You felt the decibels, and then you were hooked. And it's long training, and unlike every other airplane you flew, you could never get too comfortable in it. You know, the A-10, I was strapping it onto my butt. It was part of me. T-38 was part of you. You know, the A-7, you were, you know, the SR, I in my book, I call it the lady in the long black dress who would only dance with a few, but you better know the steps when you go out there. It was not a jet you could take. You didn't fly it every day. So you had to really be, on every flight, she would humble you, scare you, and reward you. You never knew when that was going to happen at what point, but it was for sure that you were going to have a fear moment, an orgasm, and a great moment of relief at some point. You know, it's like guys saying when landing on carriers, you know, it's that all at once you have, you know, it's just too much for your body to absorb. But it was the greatest airplane ever built. It served 6 different presidents. It did more for this country during the Cold War and the Vietnam War than you can imagine. Should have never been retired, at least for another 4 to 5 years at least. The big political football at the end there, but
yeah.
Well, for only 88 of us that got to fly the jet in history, wow.
Now
And
tell
it's
me, I mean, you almost uniquely started the concept of it being called the Sled, because of course you get the Blackbird, other folks
yeah,
called it something
and
different. Tell
they
me
did
about that.
well. The jet was called the Habu or the Blackbird. The Habu was a black snake in Okinawa that the Okinawans called it the first time they saw it, Habu, Habu. So we have a patch that we wore that said HABU on there, and it was nicknamed the Blackbird as an unofficial name. And I got all that, yeah. But somewhere in the late 80s, when a lot of those old head guys were long gone, we took a tour group. We used to take a lot of visitors out to see the jet, the VIPs. And one day, as they were standing on taxiway Charlie, getting ready to pee their pants, the jet, we were looking down there, and the jet, the way it took the runway, swung that long black nose out, and it just sat there with those 2 big engines, and you could see all the heat waves going up. Somebody said, that, God, it just looks like one of the sleds. It's a sled, meaning a AA fuel dragster, which is called sleds at the drag races. Well, I heard that. I thought, what a cool way to describe it. It does look like that. And then you see some of the black smoke coming up as he accelerates, and then the noise gets loud. So I heard that term, and so when I wrote my book, I didn't want to call it SR-71 pilot or the Blackbird, I was just trying to think of a catchy title. It wasn't to impugn the name of the airplane or to make up some thing. It was just I wanted titles to books are important. We couldn't think of one because it was all those just very generic things. And so my publisher at the time, he asked me, what did you guys call? I said, well, I heard it, the one I liked. I said, but I don't think we could use this. It was called the Sled. He goes, oh, that's perfect. That's it. Sled driver. Because if you fly the A-10, you're a hog driver. So that was, I thought, it just stuck instantly. And to this day, I am so happy we named it that, because it's an institution now. And like I say, some of the old head guys are going like, yeah, we never called it that. Well, they're right. They didn't call it that because they weren't there the day I heard the guy say that. So it's just a book title, which has become I'm laughing because I think it's a great title.
Yes, it is. I absolutely love it. It's like iconic as soon as you say it.
Yeah,
And now this is your backseat?
this is my backseater, Walter Watson. I'm very proud to introduce him in this picture. Uh, Walter was the first black officer in Air Force history to be a part of this program, and the only one. Brilliant engineer, brilliant backseater. I couldn't have had a better guy. We're best friends to this day. He's in South Carolina now. We communicate all the time. And I was elected into the Air Force Legends Hall of Fame some years ago. And 4 years later, Walter was to make us the only sled crew to be both in the Legends Hall of Fame. And I just noticed a couple years ago, General Horner got into
Wow.
Legends Hall of Fame. Here we are at a dinner in Walter's honor, where he won an award from the state of South Carolina for his educational. He taught junior high school ROTC and or junior ROTC in high school. I'm sorry, and was such a brilliant teacher and loved those kids and tried to help so many of the underprivileged black kids in that area that he really wanted to get them out of there. Great man, great RSO, great guy, and everyone when we first teamed up, they'd never had a black guy in the program or anything, and right at that time, the Lethal Weapon movies with Mel Gibson and Danny Glover, and people used to always say, "You're those guys, you are," because Walter always talked and acted like Danny Glover, like he was always, yes. I'll just be quiet and let Brian take all the heat because I know he'll talk himself right into some trouble, and then I can get away with whatever I want to. Great guy, brilliant guy, and we're proud to say we're the one crew that's both in the Legends Hall of Fame. And
That's
Walter
fantastic.
has done so much good work for his state and for the education system. He's retired now and doing well.
That's
And we
fantastic.
get together once or twice a year. We do what we call Spy Pilot Chronicles, a big, instead of my usual 50-minute talk, we do like a 90-minute SR extravaganza talk where you get to hear the backseater uh, too. And Walter wins over the audience immediately because he comes out and says, "Let me tell you what it's like to fly with a 12-year-old." And everybody just loves him then, and he embraces it. But he's a great guy, like I said, and we were. I was happy to fly to South Carolina for that event to honor him.
That's wonderful. Absolutely. So you retired at that point, age 42, is it?
Yeah,
And
I got to
somehow
fly on my last day in the Air Force. I flew T-38 at Beale, landed. They hosed me down. Thank you for 20 years of a great slice of life you can never duplicate. And
that's amazing. And somehow you managed to transition from that to photography and flying with the Blue Angels and the Thunderbirds.
well, I was always carrying a camera around, obviously. And when I got out of the Air Force, I wanted to pursue my jet photography. I was very in love with photographing jets, and then the internet became so big with jet images that it became less of a novelty. But I still enjoyed doing it, and I wanted to be the one guy to write really good books about the Thunderbirds and the Blue Angels because it really hadn't been done not since Martin Caden back in the 50s did a book on the Thunderbirds. There's a lot of little books that have been done and just very a shell of just some pictures and comments. But I wanted to be with the team, to be a fly on the wall and be with them. So I approached the Thunderbird, said, "Well, we'll let you do the entire winter training season with us. And you can fly in a chase jet, get all the pictures you want now." So it was photographically a real challenge. It was a really difficult thing, and it came off really good. They liked it, and they made me an honorary Thunderbird. They enjoyed the book so much. That's one of my great honors to this day, an Eagle Scout, and I'm an honorary Thunderbird. Well, that
And
led
that
me
and
down
that, and that book is Summer Thunder, right?
Summer Thunder. It's out of print. We're going to reprint them. They're all sold out. It gave me the confidence to call the Blue Angels up, and I said, "I don't want to just fly with you for winter training. I want to fly with you for the entire air show season fly on the C-130 to and from the shows and sit in your briefings. And even if I don't make every single air show, I want to be for the whole year, with you and sit in on the briefings and everything. And over a series of talking to Butch Voris, who was the very first Blue Angel who invented the team, who's retired, and I talked to him, and he said, let him do it. This is good. And I had the greatest year anyone's ever had when it comes to flying, 1994. It was for their 50th anniversary in 96. And I spent the whole summer with the Blue Angels. And I will tell you, that's the last flying, serious flying I ever did. About broke my body in half. Thought it was pretty tough, but then there's Blue Angel tough. And that book is sold out. It was one of the best books, prettiest books I've ever done. And of course, I love Sled Driver, but we must reprint it.
The book, Portrait of Gold, right?
Blue Angel's Portrait of Gold, and people are always still asking for them, and they're out. And the reason it's taking so long to reprint them, those were all Kodachrome slides, no digital photography. I was still shooting with film. I had to change film in the middle of flights 6 times. So we have to go back and scan all those in and digitize the whole thing, and it takes quite a while. But trust me, before I die, I will get those 2 books back out. I'm very proud of them. And I'm the only guy in America now that I can say I got to fly extensively with both teams, not just one VIP flight. So I thought I was going to be a photojournalist, aviation guy, and then I realized it's sort of a dead end because everyone has 50 million images on the internet to start with. Why would you need Brian's image of an F-15 anymore? But I got to fly with all the units around the country and F-15s and F-16s, and the Blue Angels even let me fly a little bit in the formation. That was kind of funny. One day, all 6 of Blue Angels were coming back from their practice at Pensacola, and my pilot goes, "Brian, why don't you take the stick? If you're going to write about this, you need to feel what it's like and fly for." I said, "You would trust me to fly formation? I haven't done it in a while." He says, "No, come on, we'll watch you." And so they started doing some nice little lazy maneuvers in 6 airplanes together, and you should have heard all the radio chatter. So, what's wrong with number 2? I said, it must be an Air Force pilot on the stick there. Oh my God, the guy's so rough. Yeah, what? Did he break his arm? What happened? It was really funny. But when we landed, he says, "Holy shit!" He said, "You really fly good formation for." He said, "I didn't have to get near the stick once." I said, "I did it for 20 years in the Air Force. It just comes back to you." But I entered those flight hours in my logbook in gold. I tell you that I actually got to on the stick, but it's a very heavy stick because they trim down. It's like 40 pounds of pressure. So it was. He said, "I really want you to feel what we have to put up." It's a very uncomfortable way to fly. Anyway, I came to the point where I've done all the aviation stuff I really wanted to do, and I really got into my nature photography. I really wanted to do the birds and outdoor stuff because I'd done everything in aviation I wanted to do. And I found out that the real flyers are the birds. Man doesn't fly. Man builds machines that fly and sits in them. And when I started observing birds, especially the raptors, who are the real fighter pilots of the bird kingdom out there, it was just like shooting airplanes, only they were way more interesting. Had a personality all their own. You had to get a big lens, and you had to really spend hours out there. So for the last 15 years, I've been out shooting, and just fell in love with the kestrels, harriers, hawks. They have a presence just like a fighter jet on a ramp does. When you used to see an F-4 sitting on a ramp, it had such a dignity to it and an expression. And I see the birds in a similar way. So I am pretty much into my nature photography now.
Awesome.
I don't fly anymore. My back says thank you. I was born with scoliosis and crooked back. My doctor one day said the worst thing you could have possibly done in life was to sit in the cockpit of a fighter jet and pull high G's. And I said, yeah, I only did it for 20 years. Did it? You think? So I'm always in stretching, and my back is bad. But you'll never hear me complain about any of that because I saw people so much worse injured, and I was so lucky to get to go back and live my dream and do it. You're not going to hear all the ills of how much pain I have in my body now. Oh no. In fact, I feel pretty good. Just being on your show, talking about it, and realizing how much I got to do that we could talk for 3 more hours, and you wouldn't believe half of it, because it's just like a fantasy of when you're a kid of what you'd want to do. I'm still waiting for the Yankees to call me, but I think probably not going to happen.
I think we're all fortunate you decided instead to go to the Air Force.
Well, I don't know. They were probably they never knew what to quite do with me most of the time. The word that was most associated with me was enigma, so I don't even know if that's good or bad. But
it can be interpreted in a number of ways, right?
Yeah, and I certainly had my fair share of getting away with stuff and all. There's still a guy at headquarters who won't forgive me for not having a staff job, and somehow how did he get to
exactly.
go to Blackbird? So.
I want to make sure that people know how to follow up, and so first of all, you've got a golden anniversary edition of your 2 books, Sled Driver and The Untouchables.
Yes, and we still have those in stock. It's a limited edition, and a lot of people don't even realize that I wrote a 2-book set on this. I had enough photos for the second book, which was written after the jet was declassified. So Walter and I now can tell you about our real missions. We're the guys who did the Libya raid in '86. So we can now, in the second book, tell you all about that, which actually, to be honest, my second book is a better read, more meat on the bone than the first book. But Sled Driver will always get all the press because it was the firstborn,
Yeah.
It's like the sun and Mercury, But The Untouchables is a really good read, and because we have interviews from 23 of the Lockheed tech reps in The Untouchables.
Wow.
And they were never in any other SR book that's been done. Those guys never got a voice. No one ever interviewed them. They're all dead and gone now. I went to all their homes, sat in it. It took about a year. And I'm really proud of that. Their stories are interlaced with our commentary on our missions over Libya and everything. So,
wow.
But another thing, as long as we're bragging here, Walter and I are the only SR crew that flew 3 missions in 3 days during the Libyan crisis. You never want to fly this jet 3 days in a row. It's just fatiguing. And yeah, I was refueling with my left hand on that 3rd day. It was,
oh my God,
it was great. But yes, we do still have the golden anniversary books available.
And then there's something else here, which I know both of my boys are pretty amazed about here, and because they're in it, is you have a watch now available from Ball.
I can't say I invented this idea. I was called by Ball Watch Company in Switzerland, and they said, we do these special watches for mountain climbers, race car drivers, astronauts, and we just learned all about you, and we want you to be a spokesperson for the first ever SR-71 watch. I said, yeah, no one's ever done a really good one. I said, I'll only do it if you'll let me and my graphics designer design the face of the watch, because we know how to do the SR thing really well. And they said okay, and that's why the watch is going to look really good with a nice SR emblem on it. They would have never been able to do that or have that, so it's going to be really cool. They're only making 1,990 watches because of 1990 being the year the Air Force did that final flight from Palmdale to the Smithsonian, retired the jet officially. So they said they're already taking orders, and they said we already have people signing up. The watch will be out end of July. I think they're manufacturing them now, but they took our design, and I never was a watch spokesman, so that's kind of cool.
That's fantastic.
I get a free one. They're kind of expensive, but it's if you're a watch collector, it's the Rolexes are worse, and they don't even keep as good a time. So.
Well, Brian, I just want to thank you so much. First and foremost, for your service, for really, the example that you've set and the story that is so inspirational to everyone. And that is why we started SocialFlight Live here, to support and inspire General Aviation. And I cannot think of anyone who just can embody that as much as you do.
Well, it was real pleasure and honor to be on your show. I've seen the lineup of people you've had before me, and I'm very honored that you asked me to do it, and it was a treat. And you're a great interviewer. I know I rambled on a little bit, but I enjoyed it.
Not at all. I can speak for all of our all of our viewers that we would absolutely love to have hours and hours and hours more. And so perhaps you'll be able to come on sometime in the future, and we'll talk a little bit more about some other of
Sure.
those stories. It would
I've
really
got
be.
lots of them.
I can tell.
I could fill another segment easily.
We will do that. We will do that. I would love to have you back. And so again, thank you so much. Again, your service, your story, your books, so many things that you give to General Aviation. And I'd also like to thank everyone who took time out of their evening to join us here on Social Flight Live. We do this show for you. Send us your feedback, and absolutely love having you here. Check out our YouTube channel, check out socialflight.com, spread the word, and help support General Aviation. We will be back next Tuesday with our final show before break, and that is going to be Tuesday, June 29th, with Barry and Brian Schiff, who are back to talk about flight training, the impossible turn, which is of course so controversial, and many, many, many more things. And then we are off flying adventures for the month of August, for the month of July, excuse me, and we'll be back in August. Until next time, again, thank you, Brian. I really do appreciate it.
Well, you're very welcome. My pleasure.
And thanks to all of you, and I wish you all blue skies.